Alright, so let's continue on the topic of the measures of the fertility. So crude birth rate, as we calculated before, so number of events divided by the number of people in the group, it'll be very similar to what you calculated on the dependency ratio by the age groups. So number of events in this part will be the crude birth rate, will be number of births and number of people in the group and the unit number. So the crude birth rate, the unit number will be 1000 because you are calculating for that rate per 1000. So if the crude birth rate is 180, it means there are 180 live births per 1000 people in a specific year and the area, but you usually omit that. So you should make sure that these are not the number per woman, but per people. Again, so not per 1000 woman. So that will be a tricky part on that. So why should we use the rate instead of the simple comparisons? We can compare that in country A, and there would be 1000 births. In country B, there would be 100 births. Then we would say that, or we would argue that country A is more active fertility country, for example. But this is not the case, as you could see. So country A, there were more number of births. 26,098 live births in specific year, in specific country. Country B, they had a lower number of the births, 3,498 in 2008. So their mid-year population is a little bit larger number, 278,000. Not the case. No. There's a higher number and the more number. And what would be the crude birth rate? Or which country has more active reproduction? So this is the calculation format. You may use the Excel, but if you are more familiar with the calculator, you can use that. So as you could see, number of events divided by number of group, a unit number. So number of events will be the births, number of births divided by number of population multiplied by 1000. So that will be, so crude birth rate will be 9.336, which means there would be 9 point something in the others. But country B, there's about 3 point something, 3.5, which means lower than country A. So we can see that, so in country A, there were 9.37 births per 1000 people, but in country B, there was only 3.55 births per 1000. So we can see that in country A, there was more active reproduction of the population of people. All right. So crude rate does not reflect any age structure, which means some countries would have the higher proportion of the elderly. For example, if some country like Japan or other countries, which is very relatively older than other countries, there would be the higher proportion of the people who are not sexually active, who are not in the range of the reproduction. So some rates, so at least the crude birth rate and the crude birth rate, it does not reflect the age structure or age composition. So the crude birth rate would be a little bit limited measure compared with that. So crude birth rate of the United States, we can see that these are going down and down. So it's about 13 around after 2010, which means 13 babies per 1,000 people. So I will not ask you to calculate the total fertility rate, but it says 1,891.38 is the total number of the births, and it should be divided by 1,000. So if the TFR, if the total fertility rate is 1.889, it means that averagely, 1.9 babies would be born from a woman in the United States in 2011, because there was source of the 2011 data of the health status of the United States. So this is the way of the interpretation. So compared with the crude birth rate, which was the number of the children per 1,000 woman, the total fertility rate would be, no, sorry about that. The crude birth rate was the number of the babies per 1,000 people. But total fertility rate, it was calculated for the woman. So in the interpretation, you need to make sure about the rate. So this part will not be included, so you can skip that, but you should make it. So the TFR is 1.75, which means averagely 1.75 children will be born on the woman in the country A in year something. So you need to make sure to include the full information of the area and the period of the time. All right, so as we compared the death rates and others, there are the regions on the world and the MDR, more developed regions and less developed regions, and other things. And we can see that so the world 2.41, and which one? So Africa has the highest level of the total fertility rate. So we can compare those numbers based on this data. Again, so this is repetition. So now we can have the better sense of what these numbers mean. So in the world, 2.35 on the children, and maybe you want to compare that in the with the United States. So United States, and maybe we can compare with the Korea, which has the very lowest level of fertility. And all right, you can see that, right? So, oh, sorry about that. Sometimes this happens. It's overwrapped. Oh no. So let me try this again. Sorry about that. So United States, South Korea. All right. Okay. South Korea had the 6th as a total fertility rate, but it came down and more in the world, and now in these days the South Korea has the lowest low level of the fertility rate, which means 0.88. means the average woman has lower than 1 baby, which means some families and some women does not bear a baby. So that means that the fertility rate is very, very low in the South Korea. So it's a very low level. It was 2010, 2015, so it was before the past data. But we can see that many of the countries have very high level, but some countries with a very low level. So replacement level. If we assume that, or in general, children are born based on the from the couples, and in many cases, not always, because there are some of the same-sex marriages and other types of the formation of the family. But we assume that the two adults or some adults meet each other and they generate the babies. So that if the two adults meet to make a baby, and so averagely the woman would need to have the 2 babies, and it's a little bit higher than 2.2 because there are the unexpected deaths of the children during the delivery, or less than 1 year old as an infant death rate and other childhood death rate. So a little bit higher than 2.1 is the the replacement level, which means if they have about 2.1 babies as TFR, we can replace or we can maintain the population based on the birth rate. But some countries with a high mortality, 2.4 would be considered as the replacement level because the more people are dying there. So this is about that. The sex ratio is even, and there are many of the assumptions. But the lower than the having the babies lower than the replacement rate of the fertility rate, there will be a big problem because there will be the decline of the population. So this is also not included in the exam or something, but you may need to interpret the TFR in that one. So this is the video. This is a video, but I will not include it in the lecture slide because I can add it. I can add it in the as an external link. I don't wanna add it, but sorry, I don't. So let me move to the next video and then the next slide. So again, so you don't need to calculate this. You don't need to calculate it because that will be a bit challenging. But you can try to interpret that. So 1973 in Afghanistan. So the average woman were expected to have, averagely 8.21 children were born into the average woman or to the woman in Afghanistan in 1973, and etc. and etc. and etc. So you don't need to calculate these menus or these rates, but you should be able to interpret those rates. So it was originated from this data, so I just wanted to let you know about that. Alright, so what's general trend between 2016 and 2060? And based on this number, you might be able to calculate the age dependency ratio. So you can use the age under 18 or and plus over 65 divided by 18 through 64. Then you can calculate the rates of the youth dependency ratio or the elderly dependency ratio or the age dependency ratio. I would emphasize this part for your midterm or other kind of assignments, so that you can have the chance to review this part more carefully. All right. So these are the age dependency ratio and total dependency ratio. What we say the age dependency ratio, and you can compare the proportion. The proportion takes in within the age dependency ratio. So a long time ago in the United States, in terms of the total dependency ratio or the age dependency ratio, the proportion of the youth dependency was higher. But as time goes by and in the future, the elderly dependency ratio will be much higher in the future. Alright, so population in the race and ethnicity, because of the very different types of different levels of the fertility, there will be the differentiated composition of the race in the future. So we may have more chances to discuss this part in the race and population. So let me skip this part. Alright, so these are the fertility regulations. So in many Asian countries, there were the very, very strong regulations of the fertility. As you could see in the sex structure in the previous lecture, there was a very, very strong family planning on the campaigns in those countries. But Latin American changed the key role of the non-government organizations in the Saharan Africa to slow progress, and having motivated the slow progress of the fertility. This will be the main aim of the family planning. So government support family planning and related demographic measures and population regions. So in Africa, it has the highest level of the fertility rate, but they are trying the percent of government that consider birth rate high and others. So there will be very different opinion and very different types of the government policy on those countries. Alright, so the trends in the percent married woman using the modern contraception method, and you can see that in some countries in the world level, in North America, there are higher proportions of the people they are using the modern ways of the contraception from the about 50 years ago. But there were some relatively lower chances of using the modern contraception method in other parts of the countries. But it is gradually increasing more and more. But some countries in some areas, they are not using many types of the modern ways of the contraceptive method. And the annual number of the unintended pregnancies per 1,000 women. So you can see many different proportions of the wanted pregnancy or intended pregnancy and unintended pregnancy. So the last part. So I will share a very brief of the findings of my research with my collaborators. And in the United States, there will be also some chances, very differentiated chances of the unintended pregnancy. So maybe you can try to read it over later. But when the couple both wanted baby, there were some differentiated ways of the disagreement of the using the ways of the pregnancy or contraceptive method, or but whether intended by both couples or just one kind of the disagreement or any kind of disagreement. So this part, so based on that, so when they didn't use any of the method, the contraceptive method, when they wanted to have the baby, there were the highest chance of using the no contraceptive method. But if they didn't want a baby, or if there was a many kind of disagreement, there was a low chances of using the contraceptive method. So this kind of the studies would be one example of the population studies using the measures of the pregnancy, or using the measures of the fertility, or any relevant measures of the fertility in the studies. Alright, so as I mentioned before, this lecture will be a little bit shorter than others because I skipped many parts of the calculations. But please make sure to read over the textbook chapter, even though I would not ask you the very complex calculations, but I will ask you about the interpretations or the conceptualizations of the fertility. Alright, thank you very much, and good luck in your exam.